Hundreds of people packed a local sports academy in Dnipro Tuesday to pay their respects to boxing coach Mykola Koronovsky, who was killed when a Russian missile hit an apartment block last weekend. Koronovsky was one of at least 45 people killed by the Russian strike on a Soviet-designed housing block in the eastern Ukrainian city. 6 children were killed in the attack, including an 11-month baby. The heavy toll makes Saturday's strike one of the deadliest attacks since Russia invaded Ukraine nearly 11 months ago, although the Kremlin denies responsibility. 20 people are still missing. At Koronovsky's memorial service, Orthodox priests chanted, while the 39-year-old's mother wept. Colleagues and boxers who trained with Koronovsky, who was a senior coach for the regional boxing team, said he was well-loved and respected in the community. In the aftermath of the strike, Ukrainians shared online a picture of Koronovsky's destroyed apartment. An external wall of the apartment had collapsed, exposing the family's modern kitchen, complete with bright yellow furniture. Another victim of the strike, a 15-year-old girl, was buried on Monday. 2 other residents, young women who both worked as dentists, will be buried on Wednesday. On Tuesday, rescuers called off the search for victims of the Russian strike. One of the bodies recovered from under the rubble on the 4th floor of the building on Tuesday was that of a child. Authorities said that it had taken nearly 70 hours and more than 400 people to clear the debris. More than 230 apartments have been damaged and over 400 people were made homeless by the strike. In Moscow, residents laid flowers in the snow in memory of those killed in the weekend strike, at the monument to the famous Ukrainian poet Lysia Ukrainka. Daria Herasimchuk, Ukraine's presidential advisor for children's rights and rehabilitation, reported on January 17 that only 125 children, who were illegally deported to Russia, have been returned to Ukraine. We managed to identify and verify the data of at least 13,899 children who were abducted and deported by the Russian army, and, unfortunately, we can say that only 125 of them we managed to return home, she said. Herasimchuk added that Russian troops have killed 456 children and injured 897 since the beginning of Russia's all-out war. Russia detailed plans Tuesday to expand its military to 1.5 million personnel over the next few years, a move that comes as Ukraine warns that Moscow may be planning an offensive and increase tensions between Moscow and the United States and its allies. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu announced the troop increase, which is expected to be complete by 2026, according to Russian state news agency, TASS. Russia will also create military districts in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and an army corps will be created in the Republic of Karelia along Russia's border with Finland, the Wall Street Journal reported. In addition, Moscow will set up self-sufficient units in Russian-held territories of Ukraine, Shoigu said. Only by strengthening the key structural components of the armed forces is it possible to guarantee the military security of the state and protect new entities and critical facilities of the Russian Federation, Shoigu said, according to Reuters. The announcement comes as Moscow faces setbacks on the battlefield in neighboring Ukraine. Since its 2022 invasion, Russia has been bogged down in Ukraine's east despite some territorial gains. Russian military talks driving down a road in Ukraine in single-file line. A convoy of pro-Russian troops moves along a road in Mariupol, Ukraine, on Thursday, April 21. Russia's military has around 1 million troops. The Kremlin previously considered the size of its armed forces as sufficient, but that changed after hopes for a quick victory over its neighbor were shattered by a fierce Ukrainian resistance. 3 days after a Russian Kh-22 missile struck an apartment building in the central Ukrainian city of Dnipro, the search and rescue operation was completed, President Volodymyr Zelensky said. The body of another child has been found in the debris on January 17, bringing the death toll of the attack to 45, according to Dnipropetrovsk Oblast Governor Valentin Reznichenko. In total, at least 6 children were killed in the strike. The strike also left 79 injured, including 16 children. Zelensky said that about 1,700 people lived in the high-rise building that was hit, 230 apartments were damaged, and 72 were completely destroyed by Russia's attack. He added that Ukraine is carrying out an investigation to clarify all the circumstances and identify all those involved in this crime of Russia against civilians. While 19 people are still missing, the State Emergency Service said it doesn't expect to find many more survivors. The Dnipro strike is one of the deadliest single Russian attacks on civilian areas. In the latest intelligence update, the UK Defence Ministry backed Ukraine's military claims that Moscow was using an AS-4 Kitchen, the NATO reporting name for a Soviet Kh-22 anti-ship missile. Weapons similar to the Kh-22 have been used on civilian centers before, such as a strike on a mall in Kremenchuk, which killed at least 20 people. The ministry mentioned that Russia falsely implied a Ukrainian air defense missile was responsible. Russian propaganda seized on the statement after Alexei Arestovich, an advisor to the President Volodymyr Zelensky's office, made this claim, which was later dismissed by the Ukrainian Air Force as false. Ukraine's Air Force has confirmed that the Russians launched S-400 anti-aircraft missiles from Bryansk Oblast to attack Kyiv on Saturday, January 14. The colonel noted that the entire frontline zone has been taking hits from these specific projectiles for 6 months now, as the Russians use S-300 anti-aircraft missiles to hit ground targets. However, on January 14, the Russians hit Kyiv with S-400 missiles for the first time. The strike was carried out from Russia's Bryansk Oblast. Inat explained to Ukrainska Pravda that the Russians fired more than 10 such anti-aircraft missiles, which flew along a ballistic trajectory, in Kyiv and Kyiv Oblast on Saturday. The entire frontline zone has been under attack from these missiles for half a year. Nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is the direction from which they did it for the first time, Bryansk Oblast. And from quite a long distance. S-400s have an effective range of more than 200 kilometers. We need to understand that there is also a threat from there, so certain countermeasures must be taken. There, the enemy has few options where to place them. I'm not going to say what needs to be done there, but steps are already being taken in this regard. The top U.S. military officer, Army General Mark Milley, traveled to a site near the Ukraine-Poland border on Tuesday and talked with his Ukrainian counterpart face-to-face for the first time, a meeting underscoring the growing ties between the two militaries and coming at a critical time as Russia's war with Ukraine nears the one-year mark. Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, met for a couple of hours with Ukraine's chief military officer, General Valery Zaluzhnyi, at an undisclosed location in southeastern Poland. The two leaders have talked frequently about Ukraine's military needs and the state of the war over the past year but had never met. The meeting comes as the international community ramps up the military assistance to Ukraine, including expanded training of Ukrainian troops by the US and the provision of a Patriot missile battery, tanks, and increased air defense and other weapons systems by the US and a coalition of European and other nations. It also marks a key time in the war. Ukraine's troops face fierce fighting in the eastern Donetsk province, where Russian forces, supplemented by thousands of private Wagner Group contractors, seek to turn the tide after a series of battlefield setbacks in recent months. Army Colonel Dave Butler, a spokesman for Milley, told two reporters traveling with the chairman that the two generals felt it was important to meet in person. The reporters did not accompany Milley to the meeting and, under conditions set by the military, agreed to not identify the military base in southeastern Poland where they were located. Butler said there had been some hope that Zaluzhnyi would travel to Brussels for a meeting of NATO and other defense chiefs this week, but when it became clear on Monday that it would not happen, they quickly decided to meet in Poland, near the border. While a number of U.S. civilian leaders have gone into Ukraine, the Biden administration has made it clear that no uniformed military service members will go into Ukraine other than those connected to the embassy in Kyiv. Butler said only a small group, Milley and 6 of his senior staffers, traveled by car to the meeting. More than 600 Ukrainian troops began the expanded training program at the camp just a day before Milley arrived. Milley and Zaluzhnyi's meeting kicks off a series of high-level gatherings of military and defense leaders this week. Milley and other chiefs of defense will meet in Brussels on Wednesday and Thursday, and then the so-called Ukraine Contact Group will gather at Ramstein Air Base in Germany on Thursday and Friday. That group consists of about 50 top defense officials, including Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, and they work to coordinate military contributions to Ukraine. After several months of losing territory it had captured, Russia in recent days claimed it took control of the small salt mining town of Soledar. Ukraine asserts that its troops are still fighting, but if Moscow's troops take control of Soledar it would allow them to inch closer to the bigger city of Bakhmut, where fighting has raged for months. And in a barrage of airstrikes over the weekend, Russia struck Kyiv, the northeastern city of Kharkiv and the southeastern city of Dnipro, where the death toll in one apartment building rose to 44. Western analysts point to signs that the Kremlin is digging in for a drawn-out war, and say the Russian military command is preparing for an expanded mobilization effort. Russian President Vladimir Putin is ordering Russian forces to seize the Donbass in eastern Ukraine by March, according to Andriy Yusov, a representative of Ukraine's main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense. The alleged orders come just days after Putin called on General Valery Gerasimov, who previously led Russia's forces in Ukraine in the early days of the war last year, and promoted him to command Russia's troops once again. The decision has raised questions about whether Putin is interested in standing up a new offensive operation. Ukrainian intelligence, however, is not confident that Russia will be successful in seizing the Donbass by March, given that the Kremlin's armed forces have failed to complete what was supposed to be a quick takeover campaign last February. The Kremlin has dodged questions about the Donbass orders in recent days. When asked to comment on the reports of the new aims, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov demurred. Ukrainian authorities, including Ukrainian President Zelensky himself, have been suggesting that Moscow may be willing to launch a new assault in the new year to try to seize any initiative it can after a series of routes on the battlefield. Following months of logistics and morale problems among Russian forces, Ukraine launched numerous counteroffensives last year, forcing Russia out of territories in south and northeast Ukraine, including in Kherson. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization has begun recognizing that the war may be about to enter a new phase. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said the war was entering a decisive time, urging NATO allies to send more weaponry to Ukraine to help secure a victory against Russia. In the intervening days, Russia has continued its attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure, according to a Tuesday briefing from Ukraine's military. Just this weekend, Russian attacks rained down on an apartment complex in Dnipro, killing 44 people, according to the mayor of Dnipro, Boris Filatov. Russia has recently claimed that it is making gains in Soledar, where fierce fighting has taken hold. But despite moments of apparent success, Russia's war effort has been riddled with infighting. Russia's military claimed victory in Soledar, only to be contradicted by fighters from the mercenary group the Wagner Group, which has accused Russia's government of taking credit for Wagner's work in Soledar. According to UK intelligence, Russia falsely implied a Ukrainian air defense missile was responsible. The department stressed that as with the previous 8 waves of strikes since October 11, 2022, Russia primarily targeted the Ukrainian electricity grid. The agency reiterated similar weapons had been responsible for other incidents of civilian mass casualties, including the Kremenchuk shopping center strike of June 27, 2022. According to Ukraine's Air Force Command, 5 Kh-22 cruise missiles were fired from 5 Tu-22M3 long-range Russian bombers during the January 14 mass missile attack. Additional missiles were launched from Russia's Kursk Oblast and the Sea of Azov. One of the Kh-22 missiles, which was launched from the air over Kursk Oblast at about 3:30 p.m. on January 14, hit a high-rise residential building in the city of Dnipro, completely demolishing a 9-story section of the building. Over 40 people are known to have been killed in the strike on the building, and 79 injured, 10 of whom are in a serious condition in hospital. Another 25 residents of the building are still listed as missing. Ukrainian Air Force spokesman Yuri Inat said Ukraine has no means to intercept Kh-22 missiles. The cruise missiles, which move at supersonic speeds, up to 4.6 times the speed of sound, are 5.8 tons in weight and carry a 1-ton high-explosive warhead. They have a low accuracy, and can strike anywhere within 100 to 300 meters of their intended target. Russia said on Tuesday that it would make major changes to its armed forces from 2023 to 2026, promising to shake up its military structure after months of setbacks on the battlefield in Ukraine. In addition to administrative reforms, the Defense Ministry said it would strengthen the combat capabilities of its naval, aerospace, and strategic missile forces. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the changes had been made necessary by the proxy war being conducted in Ukraine by the West, which has been sending increasingly heavy weaponry to Ukraine to help it resist Russian forces. The Defense Ministry, which has faced sharp domestic criticism for the ineffectiveness of its drive to take control of large tracts of Ukraine, vowed in December to boost its military personnel to 1.5 million. It has made numerous changes to its leadership in the 11 months of what it terms a special military operation, in which its forces initially seized large areas of southern and eastern Ukraine but have since suffered a series of painful defeats and retreats. Last week, Shoigu appointed Army General Valery Gerasimov, the chief of the military general staff, to take charge of the Ukraine campaign. The defense ministry said on Friday that it had taken control of Soldar, a small, salt mining town in Ukraine's Donetsk region that had for weeks been the focus of a Russian assault.